Hi everyone, welcome back to my communications vlogs. Today I'm going to be discussing the week 9 reading, and I'm going to be starting with the reading pop culture reading. We had two articles this week. The first one was The Pernicious Rise of Poptimism by Saul Austerlitz, and he talked about how poptimism is the belief that modern pop music is just as worthy of interest and critique as classical musical genres such as rock, jazz, or classic R&B. And this belief gives rise to the harmful idea that music is a one-way road. If you don't like modern pop music, you're resistant to change and are out of touch with the modern world, as that's just what music is now. Poptimism is not an uncommon idea. It can happen with any genre of music, as everyone likes something different and therefore can have their own favorite genre. However, just because something is popular and earns a lot of money does not mean it is necessarily good and is worthy of critics' attention and or praise even. For example, the TV show Keeping Up with the Kardashians makes a lot of money and is widely viewed across the nation, but in my opinion is not very good and is not worthy of critics' attention. There was also an example from the book where the author asked, what if the movie The Thor: The Dark World, which earned, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, robbed the not very successful but much better movie 12 Years a Slave of its Oscar? And that's the whole idea behind poptimism. Ultimately, poptimism limits musical growth and diminishes its glory by putting music into a box and saying that that's all that music can do, which in reality, music is always evolving and it shouldn't be limited. Next article was Concerning the Spiritual in Indie Rock by Judy Berman. And this article was all about how music can be much more than a superficial melody. It can dig very deep and evoke feelings from deep inside us. Spirituality is very important in music. It always has been. Music has long been used to bring people together. This is especially common in religious music such as traditional church hymns and modern Christian rock, just for two examples. The article talks about a band named Animal Collective who is looking to create something with their music much more resonant than simple sound waves. The band's music brings people together spiritually, especially during live concerts. The article talks about how the band has a kind of ritual where during their live shows they'll have the members of the audience join hands and repeat like a word or a nonsense word together, creating a sort of bond between them, and this turns the audience into one big family, even if it's just temporarily. And so the main point that I took away from this article was that music is so much more than just simple sound. It's a spiritual power that can be used to bring people together, and I actually quite agree with that, and music is a very powerful thing, and it's always been for humans. So I thought that was really interesting. Next was the rhetorical act reading, which was, we were continuing chapter 5, which were the resources of argument, and the second half of chapter 5 covered the dimensions of a rhetorical action, which, what is the purpose of the rhetoric, what belief is behind it, what drives it, what is the argument, what's the point trying to be made in the rhetoric, how is that argument structured, how are the points and evidence laid out, does this help or hurt the argument, what type of language is very important, what type of language is used to make the rhetorical argument, and then lastly, evidence, what type of evidence is used to back up the rhetoric. Next, the chapter talked about strategies of proof, which are ways to prove your point to the audience, and they listed dozens, but the three that I found the most interesting were rhetorical question, which is probing the audience into supporting the rhetoric's claim using a stimulating question, refutation, in which rhetorics state an opposing argument to their claim and then dissect the ways in which their opponent's argument is flawed. I've actually used that a lot, both in presentations and persuasive essays. That's one of my favorite ones. And then lastly is enactment, which is the rhetoric is living proof that the point they're making is true. I've actually used that as well in my first communications class that I took at SJSU, where I was talking about homelessness, and I referenced the fact that I'm from San Francisco, where we have a horrible homeless problem, and I used my own personal experiences to drive my point. Next, the chapter talked about argumentative fallacies, which are ways in which arguments can go wrong and fail. And I found, again, there was a bunch of these, but I took away the 5 that I found the most interesting. The first being begging the question, in which the speaker presents the weakest point of an opponent's argument as if it were the strongest. Next was faulty cause and effect, when the argument describes a non-existent cause and effect relationship between two things. Then there was false analogy, when two things are compared that are not alike. That was kind of like, it's like the opposite of faulty cause and effect. Then there was name calling, which in place of like a good or solid arguments that are based in fact, you just resort to name calling. Unfortunately, I feel like that happens a lot in modern politics, which just goes to show the state of the U.S. And then lastly, there was slippery slope, which is saying that if we allow one bad thing to happen, it will lead to many other bad things happening. This argument I've noticed is used a lot when we talk about gun control measures. Really avid Second Amendment supporters saying that if we do this, then all of the good guys will have their guns taken away, and then bad guys will rule the country, and then it's a weak and vague argument. You're taking one thing and exaggerating it into many other things in order to counter or to prove a point, and it's a weak form of argument. That was what I thought was most interesting about week 9 reading, and I will see you next time. Thank you.